So we don't really try to make them fill out a form or do anything like that. We really just want to hear what they're trying to accomplish, and we're problem solvers, so we're taking in what they're trying to accomplish and what their site might present as options for them to build, and kind of just combine that and tell them how we can help lead them to the ultimate goal that they're trying to get to.
Today on the podcast, we had Angela and Rob from JMAD Design on, and we just had a great conversation. It was really fun to talk about our collaboration at Honey Hill, as well as just get into the personal weeds of how they design, how the company was formed, how it operates, and how they really expanded across the country. So without further ado, here is JMAD Design. Welcome to Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today we are joined with formerly James McNeil Architecture, now JMAD Architecture, and we have got Angela. Is it Liesmaki?
It's Liesmaki.
Liesmaki.
Yeah.
That's fun to say. And Rob Hall, President of Operations and the Principal Coordinator. So thank you very much for joining us today. And we've got to know you a little bit over the last couple of months. You guys are one of our architecture partners for Honey Hill, a development that we are doing out in Orono. So I wanted to bring you in, talk a little bit about that collaboration. Really, everyone in Minnesota knows who you guys are. You have a pretty robust following, and you guys are doing some really cool stuff in the industry. So why don't we start a little bit? Tell us about JMAD's history and Jim McNeil, the founder, his history. I was looking, he's got 40 years of experience, so he's not a spring chicken here.
No.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about the origin and how Jim started the company and kind of his path to what the company is today?
Yeah, it's been a long, winding path, but Jim's had several companies over the years. He's had drafting services, he's had architecture offices, he's partnered with builders in the design build world, and that's all led to the JMAD office, where he felt like he was at a point where he could put his name on it and brought in the team. Angela and I have been with him since pretty much the beginning of JMAD, and it's been a really good collaboration.
Interesting. So to get that right, so he's got a journeyman's experience through the years, and then when he wanted to rebrand this, he had either worked with you before or knew you and said, hey, let's start this new company together. Tell me a little bit about that. I always think it's really interesting, as we usually have the entrepreneurs on, and as we talk about not only running a business, but continuing to evolve. What was about that point in time where Jim is, I want to form a team? And looking back now, 11 years ago, what was that like for you guys at the time to say, yeah, what do we want?
I know Jim and Rob have known each other longer than I've known Jim. I've known Rob longer than I've known Jim, though we went to school together at grad school. And so we stayed in touch after school, and Rob hooked me up with Jim when he was starting his new James McNeil, which is now JMAD. And we clicked, and I just started working for Jim like the next day. So
that's funny.
It's been fun. Yeah. And then Rob has pretty much been working with Jim since that same time. I'll let him tell his journey a little. It's a little different than mine.
Yeah, similar in that the hiring process for both of us was incredibly quick. I started the day of my interview, but
oh, really?
The day of, yeah. I worked a couple hours and I had to leave to go quit my other job. But
that's amazing. What did that interview? Obviously, he knew he was going to hire you probably immediately. When you walked in, go back. That's just a really funny story. Walk us through that interview and how you ended up starting work, like literally right then and there.
Yeah. So that was at a time when the company was Charles Cudd De Novo. Jim's previous company, De Novo, had merged with the builder Charles Cudd. And so I went in and interviewed with them. They're looking for somebody to come in and help with drafting 3D modeling. And that was what obviously I knew from school. And so they, I think, had it in their head. They wanted somebody young without a whole lot of experience and their own ways of doing things. So I came in and I sat down with Jim and Chuck, and about half an hour later, I had a desk and was starting to draw.
That's amazing. What I just think it's so awesome that you're just, hey, nope, when can you start? No, literally, you're starting right now. You're like, we'll deal with the contract and paying you at a later date, right, but here, just start going.
Right.
That's actually really funny. I actually think it's refreshing. I think sometimes, for those that are listening that don't own a business or are considering starting one, is that in this case, your youth and inexperience was actually an asset. Mm-hmm. And I hear that over and over again, that people they're hiring based on culture. They're hiring based on fit and talent, not experience. Because in this case, like you already said, Rob, that they wanted to they wanted you to help shape it, but they also didn't want necessarily bad habits either.
Right.
So I think that's because that would have been what, 2013? Because, right, 11 years
12,
ago?
so
11,
maybe 12.
So
yeah.
coming right out of the recession.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
okay, super interesting. How about you, Angela? What was your path to? I guess an hour after Rob starts drafting, was he texting you saying started the next day?
No, I was actually, before I joined Jim, I was in commercial architecture and had been at a couple of companies and was ready to make that leap into residential. We still do some small commercial now, but I was ready to get in the more creative aspect, designing, working really closely with clients, and just super excited to meet Jim. And Rob connected me with Jim when he started this company, and I just instantly was in love with it and excited to learn. And yeah, I made that swap from one side to the other and haven't looked back.
So did Jim have a few clients right out the gate where he was able to hire you, or what did that look like in those early days? Because it seems like we've had a number of architects on now, and a lot of their origin stories follow a similar path. No different than builders, right? You see a lot of project managers that work under a well-known builder, and then they get a client, and then they break off and start their own company. And then within a home or two, they're building out a company based on kind of that one anchor tenant, if you will. It seems like architecture has a similar path where you'll see, we've had architects on that worked with a whatever firm, it doesn't matter. And then, but it often seems like they start in pairs. And it's like someone is like, we've had a number of, actually we had, I think by the time this airs, it'll be just a week or two before yours, because we're going to interview all our partners at Honey Hill. But so Chisel, Marcy and Sarah, same deal. It's like they know each other, you guys knew each other.
Right.
It seems like that's fairly common in architecture.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is pretty much sums up the start of JMAD. I know obviously that goes back to the 40 years of experience in the industry and in the area. Jim had a deep bench of contacts and clients. And there's a couple projects that he hit the ground running with when he started JMAD.
Which is always, obviously, from the operations standpoint, it's pretty hard to just, okay, I'm going to start hiring people and have no work. That doesn't be like, congratulations, Rob. You're president of operations and financing. Go get us some work. Go get us some money, because there's nothing in the account.
Right.
I think it seems like most entrepreneurs are this way. Not all, but where I would prefer to have the work and then backfill the talent I need for it. I'm uncomfortable. I love this as I talk to bigger companies that obviously have a much bigger backlog where you could interview and train people, and then, but you're big enough company that you can afford to do that. I feel like when you're small and scrappy, you need the work first. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's the balancing act. The kind of scary thing about hiring is you don't want to overhire and not have work for folks, but you don't want to wait till you're so slammed that you can't
find the right
have enough people to do the drawings. So
it's daunting too, to like the training process. It's always that old adage to me. It's like you're either busy being busy or busy getting busy, but you're always busy.
Right.
And that someone just had a great quote the other day that really resonated with me, which is, the time to work on the dock is when the tide is out. And however, when the tide is out, you're trying to in this analogy to work, we're trying to go get jobs, we're trying to go get boats in this analogy. And so that's always hard, because you're like, is now the time to work on the dock? Is now the time to work on the business? Or is it now the time to, oh boy, we need to bring in this next boat into the dock here?
Right.
So anyway, that's always a tough challenge. Walk us through, it's interesting, what percentage of your work is in Minnesota versus outstate? Because I see, like, you, especially on LinkedIn and social media, it's seen, and your style is very appealing, it seems like, to the Western states in particular, but I could be wrong in that. Because right now you're licensed in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, Arizona, and Montana. Which is funny because Florida's a little outlier there. But I assume we have so many people that go from Minnesota to Arizona and Florida. I'm suspecting that's where this is going. But tell me a little bit about your split structure, and let's talk a little bit about how that expanded in the beginning.
Yeah, I think sorry, I just blanked on the question.
Oh, no, just basically how much of your work is in Minnesota versus outstate?
Yeah. I think at least when I was first working with Jim and Rob, a lot of our stuff was more so in Minnesota, but since 2020 hit and everything went virtual, we were like, we're online, we're all working from home, we're virtual, we're meeting people out of the state now. And all of a sudden people were finding us online more and more versus just meeting us at events in Minnesota. And I think that's how our projects started spreading around the country. And just people weren't as scared anymore to just search online for an architect and work with someone remote, because now we have the tools to actually work remote.
Well, and it's like the new norm, right? It became, because it was a worldwide phenomenon essentially of doing business online. I think you were uniquely situated, just given how, we'll talk a little bit later in the interview about just advanced movement towards imagery and towards 3D modeling, and the goggles will talk all about that. And I feel like you are early adopters in that. So it seems like that accelerated your growth. As you looked at your peers, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I would. I would say it was an intentional decision to try to expand our footprint geographically to work all over, both for just more opportunities, but also some different opportunities, keep it interesting for us. And so it was an intentional thing that we started marketing outside of the state and getting those clients.
What is your split like today, would you say?
I would say 65 to 70% is still in Minnesota, and then the rest is out of state.
Okay, that makes sense. And is that about the right dynamic? I know you can't really pick, right? It's a little bit like new homes and remodeling. This year, I'm probably 60 or 70% remodel and 30% new homes. But last year, I was 70% new. It changes a lot.
Right.
Do you find that sort of ebbs and flows or not really? Or is it pretty constant for you?
I guess it's been about at where it's at now
okay.
for a while. And it feels like a good balance. Obviously, construction administration is harder out of state, but about beyond that, we can provide the same service for our clients out of state as we can for our clients in state.
And would you say, how often are you traveling to the sites for the CA work?
Certainly to visit the site before the project starts, like to see it with our own eyes and photograph it, learn about the site before we start any design work. And then once the project's under construction, probably 2 to 3 times we'll visit it during the process.
Now, do you all have to fight on who gets to go? Like I see the pictures in Montana. It's, wait, I want to go during the ski season.
Yeah.
And oh, you know what? There's a big storm front coming, and I really need to do a site visit. I don't know, Big Sky, maybe like March, second week of March.
I think there's something to that. For whatever it's worth, I always seem to have to go to Arizona in July, so that's not the best.
No, that's not the best. That's pretty funny.
Yeah, generally it's just whichever projects we're on, we go to. Rob and I don't typically ever work on the same project together. We collaborate a lot, but I have mine and he has his that we're working on.
How big is the company in terms of people?
About 12 right now.
Wow,
So,
that's big.
yeah, we've got our design team and then drafting, marketing, and we have folks who just do the renderings for us too.
Mm-hmm. And you're
Social
handling
media.
the day-to-day operations, or how often are you well, maybe we'll keep the beginning part of the podcast more about operational stuff, and towards the end we'll talk about design and kind of the fun, fluffy stuff, which I really like. But operating the team, I'm always, especially with a team of that size and you're all remote, you don't have, how do you promote culture? How do you keep regular touch points? Walk us a little bit through how you run a team remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for us, it's all about communication and basically just learning what our teammates' preferences are and how they work. And so some people will work with and almost exclusively talk via email or chat on the computer. Some people just work best by giving them a call on the phone. And so we respond to what our employees' work styles are. And with the different technologies here, we haven't had any problem either jumping on a Zoom call to talk about a drawing quick and we can mark it up while we're looking at it together, and just using the different options that are available for communication.
And would you say that in terms of like whether it's your culture calendar or keeping the entire team in lockstep, does it fall under both of you collectively? Is that more one than another? I'm curious, like for instance, like operations meeting, it seems like a lot of building companies, like we have our ops meeting every Monday and that's like our sacred time. And so from 1 to 2, like that will not move.
Right.
Unless I move it. But anyway, the point is like, that's where we touch base. And I used to have it on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, but I sort of like it in the beginning of the week because it sets up your whole week.
Right.
And it seems, as I talk to other builders, some builders do it first thing on Monday morning. Like it's their first thing. I always want to leave enough space so that if there's any fires burning, whatever. How do you guys handle your sort of operational meetings? Do you have a group chat where it's like a set time?
Yeah, we do every Monday, 9 a.m.
9 a.m.
We've got our office meeting, which includes Rob and myself, Jim, and then our HR and also social media.
Okay.
And so we collect and talk about projects, talk about what everyone's working on, who we need to communicate with during the week so that we can, or on Monday, to make sure everybody's on the right track. Get updates from social media on how we're doing and what we
Will
need
it be
to
the whole
focus on.
team, or is it how many people are on this call?
Just 5 of us.
So would you call that more your leadership team then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you follow, I'm just more curious how I like to see how things are laid out. Do you have like a template? Do you follow like what is your path like from an operations standpoint?
It's mostly done by project. So there'll be a team on a given project. If it's a project that Angela's the principal designer on, she steers the ship on it, directs the team that she's working with for drafting, for rendering, for marketing, all of that. And then if it's a project that I'm the principal designer on, same thing, just break it down per project, put the team on it, and let them run.
Mm-hmm. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. For over 2 years now, I've been using Adaptive. It's an incredible game changer. It's AI technology based. It helps you with bill pay. And as a builder, there's very few things that anger our subs more than not being paid on time. Well, those days are gone. Not only do you know exactly where you are, but you can pay people through your ACH channels, making draws extremely quick. With one click of a button, which used to take hours, my office staff is now able to generate a draw to the bank or to the client in literally seconds. The thing that I appreciate the most about Adaptive is their ability to keep changing. We've given them 3 or 4 feedbacks on the things that we need as builders, and within just a few months, they're rolling those things out. This is saving us hours per week and days per month in terms of our efficiency. If you're looking to upgrade your business, I'd highly recommend Adaptive. You can reach out to them at adaptive.com or listen to the Curious Builder podcast, episode 15 or episode 80, where we dive into their origin story. This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 20 years, I've been using Pella windows, and I couldn't be happier to call them as a business partner, a trade partner, and someone that really supports us in our quality builds. We use wood windows and doors on every single one of our homes, and 98% of every home that I've ever built has been a Pella window. I've gotten to know their team here locally as well as nationally, and the way that they support us as a craftsman, as well as they support our homeowners with their lifelong guarantee, has actually been a game changer for me. So when people ask me who I use, I recommend Pella. If you want to hear more about Pella's story, you can listen to episode 1, where I interview Peter and Ed from Pella Northland about their journey into the Pella ownership. From a sales standpoint, you guys have a showroom, which is a unique setting in IMS. For those that aren't familiar with Minnesota, it's International Market Square, this central hub of all these amazing design firms, architecture firms, vendor partners. It's just a unique, I don't know, what other, just real quick, in other states, do other states have something? Is it very common that there's an International Market Square, like this giant hub of...
I know there's some, but I don't know if every state tends to have that.
Yeah. I just think it's really unique, and it's a really valuable resource. How long have you been at IMS with your office space there?
Since 2020 or 2020.
So it's pretty recent, or the last 4 years. And, and it's funny because for those listening are like, hey, they just said they didn't have an office.
Right.
It's more of a showroom. So it's interesting. What I was impressed is, and maybe we'll go into it now because I keep hinting at it. We'll go back to sales later. We'll talk a little bit about, you guys are really known for virtual reality tours, or at least that's what I feel like you're known for really well, other than great design and amazing people. But like you walk into the space and it's this big open floor plan. You're like, where is everyone? Where's the desk? At first you're like,
is anybody here?
Did they just move in? I'm sure you get that a lot. So you've got obviously beautiful photos on both sides. So think of this, for those listening, this is a giant like rectangle room, probably 24 feet wide by 60 feet deep, roughly. That's how I design. And then you have a little office in the back, but really it's set up for a conference room in the back where you would meet with clients, you'd show them the plans, but then Rob will get this grin on his face and he says, do you want to see the plan or do you want to walk the plan? And then you'll put obviously your Oculus Rift or whatever headset goggles you guys are into, and then people can walk around their home while you're talking to them. Is that?
Exactly. Yeah.
And walk us through obviously the early adoption of that, where it's at today and what your clients are saying about it.
Yeah, it's super fun. And one of kind of the principles of our firm is to stay at the forefront of technology. So we're always researching and figuring out new and better ways to do things. And how I've always thought of VR is just the next step in the evolution of both design and presentation for our work. And so it started with a floor plan drawing, and then eventually it was 3D modeling on the computer. And then the next step is virtual reality, to actually walk in the space and get the real sense of scale and layout and understand literally every single detail of what your new home will be like, which obviously our clients aren't usually used to reading floor plans. And so this is just letting them see the space, how the actual thing will be in 3D.
What I really appreciate about it is you can also take this to the job site, right? You could have a home that's just framed up or just subfloors on, and they could be outside and remotely put on these goggles and say, oh, hey, what does this kitchen look like again? Yeah. Which I think is a pretty unique tool.
We definitely encourage our builders to have a VR headset on site from the beginning of the construction all the way through, because what's really helpful and what we've done at the office even before construction is having subcontractors out to walk the building with us in VR so that they can see, oh, this is how it's all coming together. And then to have that tool on the site as well is really valuable.
Can you do slice images of the inside as well so that when you, let's say someone is bidding it, they can bid the interior elevations or like some sort of modeling without actually having on the headset?
You mean actually being in VR? And
No, not necessarily, but basically they obviously you can get elevations of the inside.
yeah.
I'm sure you can take screenshots of where you're in there, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So is that typical? Because I assume not every single subcontractor is probably coming in to do a virtual walk before they bid it, because that'd be a lot of people coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we used to, for years, print off 3D views because we always have been working in 3D modeling before VR for years and years. What we would used to do is print off views of every wall of a room, and once framing is done, go up and actually nail those to the wall in the house. And now if you can just have the VR headset out there, you can get so much more information than a still picture.
Right. I mean, or a QR code. Now you can just put a little QR code everywhere you go. And I imagine with you having remote clients, to your point, because these goggles are not crazy expensive, right? $600, $1,000? How much are they?
Not even.
Like 3 to 5.
Yeah.
3
So,
to 5.
and you've had some homeowners just buy them independently so they could do it at home, right?
Oh, yep.
I would say 90+% of our clients, after they try it for the first time with us, they go out and the next day probably get a headset. And
Wow, you guys should get a brand deal with.
really should.
I mean, at 90% conversion rate, that's pretty high. If you guys don't have a licensing agent, I think the Curious Builder might have to represent you guys. This is very lucrative. Okay, you mentioned being on the forefront. Obviously, AI. Recently, I was hosting a panel at a conference here in Minneapolis about AI, and it was really fun to talk to a CTO, John Walker from Buildertrend, was talking about we're users. He's actually working with teams to implement the AI and how to use it for our sakes. What are some things that you're using now internally, and where do you see AI in terms of architecture? Because there's the operation sides, which I mean, most people at this point are using Chat GPT for blog writing or creative outlines, or even some of these questions. I actually typed in a couple of prompts and not even using them because I'd rather just have organic conversation. It helps for research and for outlining your thoughts. Maybe to the first part of this question, how are you using technology operationally inside architecture? And then the second part would be, where do you see, or how are you using in actual design?
Operationally, to start with, I know we use it for note taking, which is really great because it helps keep a good list of what you discussed and what next steps are. And that's something that you can share with the whole team.
Which program are you using?
It's just through Zoom.
Okay.
So whatever the Zoom record
Yeah, because it'll summarize it for you too, right?
Right,
I use Otter.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really slick is even when you're not in the interview, if someone allows your chat bot in, it'll record. I've had it before where I either spaced on a meeting or just couldn't make it, and it'll send me the 10 recap. I'm like, man, I can replace myself. I don't even need to be here. It tells you all the things you need to do. So yeah, that's
right.
Yeah, I can see why for a bigger team that's really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess in terms of the large language models, like you mentioned, there's not anything too specific to the architecture field, I would say, that we use it other than for meeting notes, for writing drafts, research assistant, like you mentioned. Where we've used it more specifically for architecture is in kind of the image generation capabilities. And I would say that it doesn't really feel super useful or super ready for prime time with where things are at currently from at least our own day-to-day operations. I will say what the most kind of magical use case we found for AI is taking a hand sketch, putting it into the software, and instantly getting 5 different versions of that hand sketch as a photorealistic rendering.
Really? That's kind of cool.
And recently, beyond that, you can take that 2D image and you can almost make it move. So it looks like a slow video across a space, which is
that's pretty
really crazy.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
What program is that?
We use Stable Diffusion.
Yeah.
So all you do is you can upload an image. Jim is still a master with a pencil, and so he can whip out a sketch like no one's business, and then we'll scan it, upload it, and then you can put in a text prompt to go along with the image to describe what kind of like style or feel you want, if you want a particular time of day. And then just click generate and it'll give you however many different versions you requested. And you can control how creative it is versus how much it sticks to the
original
input.
sketch.
Yeah.
That's really clever. I think I've been listening to, actually, it was this book called Impromptu. John Walker, the CTO of Buildertrend, recommended. He's a huge AI proponent. And in the book, it was talking about how these are tools, no different than chief architect, no different than 3D modeling, all of these things. I think sometimes people get concerned about artistry, but I love what you just said. Like, Jim is creating the architecture, and then he's using the software to help interpret it a number of different ways.
Right.
It almost be different, like writing poetry and then say, write it in Japanese, Chinese, like convert it to different languages to see what, I don't know if that's a great analogy or not.
No,
but
I think so.
We're not trying to relinquish our creative control to the software.
yeah. Do you think that it's going there? Do you think there'll be a point where I could say, hey, here's 10 homes that I like, or I don't know why I'm picking 10. Let's pick 5. Here's 5 home styles that I like. I want it to be 4 bedrooms, 5,000 square feet. I want it to cost, that'd be pretty cool. I want it to cost $2 million or whatever. Is there anything out there that can even remotely start putting that kind of stuff together, or it's not there yet?
I think there's the start of that. And I think, yes, that will get to that point, but I don't think it will be for a while.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Where do you see, what other sort of technology advances are you seeing in architecture or operations right now?
There's always the computer software that we use, improvements, ways to show our work better, take what used to be a crude 3D model and be able to present it in a meeting with the client as a photorealistic rendering. So they get the shade and shadow, they get the time of day, they can see how the sun will actually work across the building, where it is in the world. So
I love, is that kind of that circadian rhythm light segment where it's like, hey, at 6 a.m. it's here, and then it walks you through a day of light.
Right.
I'm always a big fan of anything with natural light.
Yeah.
I was just walking a site last week with a couple, and I have this little app called Sunseeker. I think I paid $9 for it. I think it's the best app I've ever spent money on. I use it all the time, but it just shows you the orientation of the sun, and it'll walk you through the path while you're out there. But it'll also do summer solstice, winter solstice, so it tells you the different paths. And winter sun in our climate's always really nice. And if nothing else, it's a great wow effect. Ooh, okay, that's cool. So anyway, it's worth your $9. I don't know what it is anymore.
No, I think that's a good point, though, because I think that kind of brings you into some of the sustainability aspects of designing, too. And we have quite a few clients who ask, I want to see how the sun's going to come through the building and how that affects our heating bill or our cooling bill or whatever. And I think it's another tool that we can provide the clients, which is great.
Let's talk a little bit about, let's go back to a question I was going to go down earlier, and then we'll talk into your keys of service and your keys of design, which are how you, I think, go through design. But walk us through the sales process. Now you have a bigger team, and because you don't have a central office, how are you interacting with clients, especially if they're local? Obviously, if they're remote, you're meeting them virtually. But even if you're meeting virtually, who's meeting them? Is it the 2 of you, 1 of you, 3 of you, 10 of you? How do you go through that process?
yeah, it's any combination of our kind of leadership
Schedules,
team
yeah.
and who's available. And so we usually try to get at least a couple people to meet with the new client. So maybe one person can focus on steering the ship on the screen versus having a conversation or taking notes. And if it's, an out-of-state client, we're meeting virtually. If it's in-state, we'll probably be sitting down at our conference room and we just like to show what we do, basically. And so we'll have on the screen in front of them some past projects, some current projects, so they can see what their process will be like when they're working with us.
Mm-hmm. When you see design, so it's funny in my mind, if people that are familiar with will know this, but people that aren't will look it up. It's interesting, like what the work that I've seen of James and the team, the JMAD team, excuse me, I think of maybe more like some of the iconic ones that are very rustic, but he does, and you as a team do everything. You've got some European, you've got some chateau, some stone. This is more of a broad question. How have you avoided being typecasted with a specific style, but sometimes you're known for a style, even though you do everything? Mm-hmm. Does that resonate with you a little bit? Like what people would maybe presume that you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like to showcase that we do all kinds of architecture, all styles. We don't just specifically say we're only going to do this or only going to do that, but we enjoy the wide variety of architecture that we can do. And I think a lot of it, how we've been able to really build up our name in that is we always tie our designs back to classical architecture, and making sure with that in mind, when we're designing, our home becomes more timeless, no matter what kind of style it is. And so I think that speaks to our wide variety on our website.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really fair. It's interesting because I think you can be really niche and be specific, but you can also be very broad. And at the end of the day, a big part of my job, it seems like in Minnesota anyway, I've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast, but just our market with the Pareto homes being 75 years old, we have a very strong builder and buyer relationship, more so than probably other states. We've had designers on from Texas. It's like, oh no, they come to the designer first. Go out to LA, they go to the architect first. And so it's like, at the end of the day, you need all three anyway. So it's just really about assembling the team. And I feel like a big part of my job is the temperament of the people that we choose to partner with. And maybe this is a great plug of why. So we're doing Honey Hill as with Tom and Sean from Aspect Design Build, as well as Mark Williams Custom Homes, our other company. And we had looked at several companies. I'd come in to interview with you, and I've obviously known your work and been through it many times through different, like Drew Hewler. Obviously, he's built a number of homes with you, and I was in his home recently that he just sold. And so anyway, there's something about that personal connection that I really enjoy. And then you gravitate towards certain people. And also, I think for Honey Hill, I feel like we've been listing it as like where nature meets luxury. I feel like you could almost have that as JMAD's description. I mean, it really is. I mean, it feels like you have a very biophilic vibe to a lot of your homes have a very, for lack of a better description, earthy or like organic feel to them. At least that's what I see when I see a lot of it, which appeals to me. I like that it feels tangible. It feels like you want to touch the things that you're putting on the home. and so anyway, it was interesting as when we were sitting down as a team, who do we want to be a part of this? Who represented? You guys were one of the three that we selected. It was Christopher Strom, it was you guys, and it was Chisel. And so that's been really enjoyable for me to have this multi-team. We've got 3 architects, we've got 2 sets of builders, and I really like this team building approach. In this sense, I feel we're part of a team, like we're collectively trying to get, and a big part of it then is we want the client to come in that resonates with, all the architects can do great work, but it's who do they connect with? And I know that's something that I value greatly. And so I seem to be drawn towards people that are really warm and just people that you want to be around with. I don't know what you guys say to your clients, but I always tell this is like my number one line to my clients. If it's even a line, it's just truth. It's like, who do you want to spend the next 2 years of your life with? Because my design could take anywhere from 3 to 7 months, depending on how big it is or how involved it is. And then the build process, again, depending on how big the homes is, going to take anywhere from 10 months to 2 years, for obviously there's outliers in both scenarios there, but
definitely.
Anyway, yeah. And like at Honey Hill, when we had the harvest of what we had at that, in I think the second week of October, and I mean, you couldn't have asked for a more perfect fall day. Yeah. We had live music, a food truck, we had you guys out there, and that even like the barn that was out there for everyone to interview with. Perfect. That was like, oh man, I felt like it was in a postcard or a Hallmark movie. But anyway, just really, really awesome to have you guys there interacting. Had you ever done something quite like that before?
Probably not something quite like that in terms of having it be so outdoors and so interactive. I think you throw a good party.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Imagine what happens if we could build a house with you guys. But what I liked about it was, going back to your headsets, is we had, so for those listening that didn't go, there was this old barn that was on the property. We tore down the other buildings, but we kept this old barn that we can modify into a pool house or a playroom or sports facility or whatever people want to do with it. But down in the lower level, which is actually really cool and organic feeling, had all these essentially stables. I think they had donkeys and horses prior. And we cleaned it up, and Rob had, thank you. Nobody had to step in any cow pies, but that room was perfectly set up for virtual reality. Yeah, so we had all these people coming in, and it was really funny because some of my past clients, Mike and Lori, were there, and Lori was with the headset on, and I walked in, and my voice is very loud and very easily to recognize, and she obviously knew who I was right away, but I was of course I was spoofing her, right? Oh, this virtual reality is amazing, and so I was having a good time with it, and of course she couldn't see me. Right. And so anyway, it was just such a fun time. But my kids were out there, and my daughter and my sons grabbed the VR set, and they were like, of course, immediately like, Dad, why don't we have these at home? But I just think it's really neat that you can take that. We're literally outside in a field. Yeah. In this case, we're in a barn, and you are walking through a multi-million-dollar home. So that was just really a fun day. Let's talk a little bit about what's very clearly laid out on your website. Let's talk a little bit about how you design and how that might be unique and thoughtful. You have this keys of service, which are sensitivity, consideration, creativity, and efficiency. Tell us a little bit about like why these things or how this resonates with the people that you're designing for.
I think for the keys of surface, there's a reason it's number one, because the design is fun and exciting and we want to get to it. But before we can do any kind of design work, we have to understand our clients. And so that's why we have sensitivity, consideration, then creativity. We want to make sure that they feel like they're being heard, like what they are expecting out of the process and out of their design, it will actually come to fruition. So by talking to them, listening, showing them that we care about their future home is at the forefront of what we want to do when we meet with our clients.
One, I like what you said. Actually, this just came up in a conversation yesterday. I've been building for 20 years, but most of the clients we build for have never built before, or maybe one sort of remodel or something building related in their life. Obviously, it's easier if they have been through it. I mean,
Sure.
They just get the program a little bit quicker. But I like what you said. We've done this before, but you might be new to the process. Like making them feel comfortable. I think really showing empathy.
Right.
And showing them, I think listening is probably... I think it's just in general, you mentioned communication earlier, Rob, how you keep your team together. But honestly, communication is the number one thing.
Yeah.
And you both are actually particularly good at. That's actually one of the reasons why we also chose you as a partner, is just how great, and kudos to you specifically, Angela. You're like, you are on it.
Thank you.
Which trust me, as an Uber communicator, it relaxes me. I'm like, yes.
Just want you to be comfortable.
Another fellow communicator. When you are interviewing your clients or they're interviewing you, how are you doing it morally organically, just listening to them? You've got your note taker listening, or do you have like the intake form where it's more prescriptive? And how do you normally intake that information?
It's pretty loose. We don't really try to follow make them fill out a form or do anything like that. We really just want to hear what they're trying to accomplish, and we're problem solvers. So we're taking in what they're trying to accomplish and what their site might present as options for them to build, and just combine that and tell them how we can help lead them to the ultimate goal that they're trying to get to.
How often you mentioned that you've got a 70-30 split in-state, out-of-state. What percentage of your total builds are coming already attached with a builder with it, or is the architect coming to you alone?
I think it's pretty close to 50-50.
Okay.
Sometimes the clients come right to us. Sometimes they'll go to the builder first. And we always say we like to get the whole team together as early as possible anyway. So ultimately, it doesn't make a big difference from our end, because if they come right to us, the first thing we want to do is get the builder involved too. So from the very first day of design, we have the whole team together and everybody can help with their expertise.
And mainly it seems like meaning I guess I'm representing builders in this analogy, is because I am one, is a pricing, right? And I think the scenario often outlaid to the clients is just, again, we say the same thing on the other side of the table. It's nice when everyone's consistent. Like, we just want to assemble the team.
Yeah.
And really it's conveying to the team. And I do think the client gets there's no question that they get not only better service, which goes back to your keys of service, but they get a better end result. Everyone is happier when the team is assembled on the front end. I never thought this analogy before. It'd be like, if you didn't do that, it's like showing up to your wedding and not knowing who you're going to marry. This idea, I know how actually this is a great analogy. Think about it. It'd be like designing your perfect wedding, like curating the guest list, having all the food picked out, but then you show up and you're like, which husband do I think is going to make me the happiest for the next 30 years? Okay, give me your bids, give me your numbers. It's just straight, like, you have to make this decision like right now. Like, everyone's going to watch you get married. I'm going to use this analogy for sure again. But because honestly, but isn't it better to understand who your team is? But this happens a lot where, and there's a place for it, but, where people, it seems like when relationships break down, either hasn't been good communication from the builder, and it could maybe not be heard by the client. It's not always going to be the builder's fault, obviously. But it seems like if we come into a competitive bid situation where it's already been done, something broke, like something went wrong, or usually the price is so out of whack that they feel like the trust has been lost. And so then things are dicey.
Right.
From your point of view, because you've obviously been a part of this, is that how do homeowners and builders alike avoid that scenario happening?
I think it can be as simple as just making sure you're sending a weekly email alerting the team of what work is going to be done for the week ahead, and make sure everybody knows what's being done and what the expectations and deadlines are. And then also having the builders in our design meetings too is, I think, a key.
There's a lot of times where we'll have a client meeting and the builder will be there, and we're literally designing the home in the meeting. It's not like we're disappearing for a week and then saying, hey, let's meet again. And we're like literally putting together the home. It's almost like bubble diagramming before 3D. And now we're just building it all in 3D in front of the client.
Well,
that way the builder can help gauge, let's maybe move in this direction.
Lake Society magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
If we just design it and it never gets built,
Right.
nobody's really happy. Honestly, nobody. You're
Right.
not happy because it's paper. You could do that at any time. We're not happy because we didn't get to build it. Client's not happy because they don't get to live in it. It's a lose-lose scenario here. But I do love that one of the reasons why the homes always look different is each time, even if you have the same team, the homeowners are always different.
Right, definitely.
And so, and the site, I should say, the site is a voice too. The site gives a huge voice to what the architecture is. Sometimes clients will come in, right, with an image of what they want, or they'll say, hey, I want a walkout. And it's just like a pancake lot. And you're like, I mean, we can if you really want to. But anyway, you get the point.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch base on keys of service before we go to keys of design?
Maybe just to tie back to the first meeting, I think a big part of that first meeting too is getting either myself or Rob in that meeting if we're the ones on the project, so they can meet us and see if they
Who they connect with.
enjoy connecting with us and talking and feel like they're being heard.
If they meet both, that's a good question. If you guys are both running, not that you don't collaborate, obviously, but if you're both running separate teams, how do you know which client, like if I'm interviewing with you, like how do I know who I'm building with?
It depends. If it's obviously somebody we've worked with before or is recommendation from a different project we worked with, we try to keep that team together. If it's really just out of the blue, it could just be based on whose schedule is the best aligned, and then just having those people in the meetings from the get-go.
Yep, it makes sense.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the times we're collaborating, so it's. I like to think of us all as the same team. We're not like separate. We're all working together. It's just whoever has
Taking the lead on it.
Yeah.
We have the same deal with the project manager, right? They tend to know the client very, very well. We show up, or like today, we had our bi-weekly site meeting. So we had the architect there, I was there, but really the project manager is there multiple times a day. So they get to know Mike, my PM way better than, not that they don't know me, but at this point, it's like, I guess in this analogy, it's like the doctor and the nurse. You see the nurse several times a day. The doctor might only round on you, once a day kind of thing. So anyway, the keys of design, you have them listed out there. It's health, safety, and welfare, design intent, artistry, and presentation. The first one was keys of service. You're really connecting with them. You're showing them your creativity, your sensitivity, how you communicate. The next step here, this keys of design, walk me through what informs this and how you guys look at it.
Yeah, I think it starts from the really essence of architecture in terms of we're responsible for providing the health, safety, and welfare of our clients. We're providing them with shelter, and we're providing them with places where they do their daily tasks, cooking, eating, sleeping. And so making sure, first and foremost, we're providing them a safe, functional space is certainly the first thing that we need to make sure we do. And then it has to function well as well. So we need to make sure we're listening to them, we're learning how they live, because everybody might want something a little bit different orientation of parts based on what they've liked in the past or what they have seen on the internet. And so we can start there.
The double-edged sword. That's great. That's also really bad. It's interesting you're talking about health and safety, and it's funny because you could have 4 walls and a roof, and that's a tent. I went camping with my kids the other day, and they were just as happy in the tent as they were in their bed. Now, Dad was not as comfortable on the ground as I am in a bed, but the point of it is I feel like in the higher end homes that we build and you design, I feel like it's something I don't want to lose sight of. You're building a home for somebody. Right. They're going to have their life memories here, their children. Like, it's very impactful. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'll just speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for you. Sometimes I have lost sight of that because I get really caught up in the artistry, in the creativity and the innovation. And I'm really excited about, and it's not that I guess I am caring about them, and it probably is just, maybe it's like breathing. I'm not thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's there, but I like those pauses where you realize this is a home that, and not only someone was on the podcast recently where we were talking about that the average American lives in their home for 12 years. So it's actually very short compared to like in Europe, it's multi-generational. Mm-hmm. They view homes a little bit differently, but anyway, it's a cultural thing. But the point is, let's say these homes last 100 years, 200 years, however long they last. You're going to have 5, 10 families that have all these memories, and while our client is the one that we're building for, mm-hmm. sometimes I forget how long that home is going to be around, right. informing memories and cherishable moments. How often do you guys think about that in those terms?
All the time.
Yeah. Good. Whew. Somebody's got me covered then.
No, sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think if we can, through our design function, the health, safety, welfare, if we can elevate those kind of daily processes, to your point, you're elevating those memories throughout the years for everybody who comes through the house. And so if it's making sure we provide ample daylight so that people don't feel like they're enclosed and we're able to relate to nature and you're not shut off from your surroundings, I think that has a big opportunity to impact just daily life in a way that you don't always notice at the forefront of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think too, helping our clients understand how they want to live next is really important, because whether they were in a home they built before or just one they had purchased, I'm sure they have things they like and dislike about it. But to help them understand, as we're doing those 3D bubble diagrams, how do you want to live now, and how will these spaces relate to each other or not relate to each other? Or it's really important to always bring them back to that. Okay, how are you going to use this space, and how do you want to have your dinner parties, and how do you want to live in the kitchen? And just having all these different conversations about all the spaces, I think, brings them to a better sense of what they want in their future home versus just living how they used to live in the previous one.
Piggybacking that idea for yourself, as you're challenging them to think about the future, about what their lifestyle will be, how do we you as creators and all of us as an industry, where do you think we are in pushing the boundaries of new things? Versus a lot of times people come to us because, oh, hey, Angela and Rob, you guys built this amazing house. I want something. So you're recreating it new because nothing will ever be the same, right. But it was inspired by something you've already done. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's, hey, everyone is 5 to 10% different. Mm-hmm. Very rarely do you have a client that's like completely everything's new. Like 90% is new and 10% is old. Like that just rarely happens. I think it's happened once in my career. And so I guess my point is how do we continue to, because there's things that individually, Angela, you would be passionate about, and Rob, you'd be passionate about. And we're trying to find connection with our homeowners and saying, well, what are you passionate about that I'm passionate about, that we can jointly move this in maybe a new way or something different. Can you speak a little bit to that terrible question in terms of just, how do we get our creativity? Because it's like, for me, maybe it's my ADHD. Like I always want to do something a little different. I think that's what appeals to me about building, is because every home is different, because every client is different. Every partner's different. Walk us through how you do that.
I think there's a couple different responses to that. First, just as a philosophy, I think that our company embodies is taking incremental steps forward. We, like Angela mentioned earlier, we are always informed by history. And so we're starting, even on a modern home, we're starting with some ideas from classical architecture. And so we're not trying to do something that's completely out there and unrelated to the history that has come before it, because there's a lot to be gained from that. But at that point, we still want to make sure we're moving forward in terms of how people are living today and make sure we're adapting to modern life, and be that in kind of floor plans or what spaces people are looking for. That's where there's room for growth.
Yeah. How about for yourself?
I think like I might have certain passions that like I'm like, it should really be this way, but it's more so about what the client wants, and it's our job to guide them. So if there's something that maybe we feel like maybe want to double think how you're going to do this, say, for example, just a the example that comes to my mind, just because I've been dealing with it a couple times lately, is the idea of a basement versus the idea of like main level living, walkout entertainment space. Trying to help. I feel like a lot of homes are moving in this direction of main level living, aging in place, entertainment on one level, and not just going down to the basement for kind of your entertainment. And I think helping them understand how, if they're pushing the basement, try to help them understand how main level living could really be a route you want to look at, because you got your kitchen, you don't have to do a second kitchen, you don't have to do a second bar, you don't have to do a second living room. You're using these amazing spaces that we're creating on the main level. And so just helping to guide them.
And I think the fact that you build in other states, a lot of other states, I would imagine Arizona and Florida probably don't do a lot of basements, if any at all. And I think a lot of it are Scandinavian descent here in Minnesota, right? And you've got a lot of their whole root cellars, and that it's very rare not to have a basement in Minnesota, frankly. But part of it is our frost footings, right? I mean, I was explaining this question actually just Monday to a client, like, why do we do basements? And one of the main reasons is it's really inexpensive. I mean, it's easier to build up than it is to build out. Or I should say, not easier, it's less expensive. Traditionally. And so there's a cost function of it as well. And then our culture is very used to it. It's pretty unusual not to, but it's challenging a little bit. What is your lifestyle? What is it that you want? And of course the site has to. If you're doing a lot of infill stuff, we do, let's say 7% of what we're doing is tear down rebuilds. They tend to be on smaller lots, not always going to have the availability to build as big as you want or as wide as you want. I had that question and now I'm blanking on it here as we're coming into the end here. Where do you see, I know, what excites you about what you do? Where do you see the next 10 years of JMAD, and what do you see as some of the next evolution in the steps?
To me, the kind of a couple of the reasons to get into architecture is to be a problem solver, to solve problems for people in how they live their lives. And then also in our keys of service, the artistry aspect is important too. We look for any opportunity that we can be creative, and that speaks to working in any different style. If a client loves real modern style, we can use our creativity tools to work and design them something really exciting in that way, or it can be more rustic, it could be shingle style. And I think the breadth of projects is what's exciting to me.
How about for yourself, Angela?
Yeah, I would agree with Rob. I think just continuing to get really exciting, creative clients and projects, and expanding our horizons for what we're doing, and using technology to our benefit for helping clients understand their home is where I hope we keep pushing and striving towards that.
I remember the question I was going to ask you. Have you ever had a client where you mentioned about how it's our job to inform them and help guide them, but we need to listen to them, where you get a client that has a strong personality, they know what they want, so you give them what they want, and then they say, we really wish you would have shown us more things, or we wish we would have shown you more interesting things. And I remember looking, and I'm thinking of one in particular, thinking of this, of my designer, I'm like, they didn't want any of our advice. They didn't want, and now we're being criticized because we're being held to a weird double standard. Like we can't, in that moment, we can't show them all the things that they evidently expected us to do because they wanted everything that they wanted. Have you run into that before?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how to answer that. I feel like you definitely have some clients who really know what they want. And again, it's just, how can we take that into consideration, but then guide them down, not to the dark side, as Jim always said.
and it's fine if they're self-aware. I think the one I'm thinking of, they weren't self-aware enough to realize that was their own criteria. And so it's like they're asking us to do something, but our hands are tied.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves that part of the reason they hired us is because we know what we're doing in terms of design, and we've been around the block and can help them. And it's then up to us to show them why that solution that we're proposing is the best one.
Do you have a rule that, I'll do it 3 times and then I'll do whatever you want? I'll just phrase it like this. If you want me to build you a purple house with white spots, like I'll do it, but I'll probably tell you 2 or 3 times like that's a bad idea. But at the end of the day, like if you really want to pay me to do that, I will do that for you. I'm not above doing what my client wants, but we're trying to guide them. It's a ridiculous example, which is why I use it. Do you have something like that where it's like you'll push back a few times, but then I think that's where it seems like experience, what is that? Tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. Like, you don't want to get into an adversarial relationship with the client. How do you guys handle that? How do you handle those situations where I like what you said, Rob, about you're trying to show them? I guess with your modeling, you could probably draw something and show them like, this is what it would look like. Maybe you don't have that as much because you're able to show them.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I think you're right. Being able to have the 3D model is a good communication tool and is easier than trying to talk through a floor plan of what they might want, because we have to always remember that we're operating in 3-dimensional spaces for our final products. And so having drawings that are in 3 dimensionals can solve those questions. But I like your idea of giving them a kind of three chances to go the route we're thinking about.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I agree, it's their house, they're going to be living in it, and we're here to give them something that they will love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think our goal is to try and show them the volume of space, where most of the time they're thinking in 2 dimensions and we're thinking in the volume of space. And so if they really want to see something that way, we'll show them, but we will also explain why a different way would better suit that particular element or whatever part of the design it is. But I think usually that helps guide them back to, oh, okay. And I think just making sure they feel like they have trust in us.
Right.
We want them to feel like the decisions we're making and saying, I think if you go this route, you're going to love it. We want them to feel like they can trust us with that, and not, when they are in the house, say, I do love this. I told you I would like it better than the other.
Yeah, that's not really the point, right?
Right.
I think you're right. I think reassuring them that you have their best interest in heart. And sometimes I know I have a strong personality. So I'm thinking of one in particular recently where I was really zealous about how it's a silly example, about the fridge, and the homeowner just absolutely would not go for it. And I pushed hard, to the hardest I've ever pushed in my career, because it was really, really, really bad design. I'll tell you, they wanted the refrigerator. It's all completely white oak kitchen, and they have this really unattractive, cheap refrigerator that sticks proud of the cabinetry, that has a 2-inch air gap all the way around. And I just about had a heart attack. And I pushed back 3 or 5, 6. I way exceeded my rule. And I even got to the point where I said, I will pay for it. I've never done that before. I said, it means so much to me. Like, I'm thinking, like, I can't take a photo of this kitchen with this refrigerator. And I was like, I will. And they said no.
Wow.
And they said, if you are going to do that, you'll just screw us some other way. And exactly. My head did exactly that. And I said, really? I said, if you think that of me, why are you even building with me? Mm-hmm. And we got through it, and the designers were there. They were like, things got a little heated. And really, we had a great build, great client. It was just this one hot button for both of us. I was like, I am not putting this in my kitchen, his kitchen. And we did what he wanted. And I said, Mr. Homeowner, I said, do you want my opinion? And he said, no. And I said, I just want to be really clear. You do not want my opinion on these matters. You just want me to do what you're saying. And I made it very clear. Here's a guy to a guy, like, I'm going to make this so abundantly, bluntly clear that I cannot mistake what he's telling me. I do not want your opinion, and I want you to do what I'm telling you to do. I was like, okay.
I think there you just have to document it, and then you have to adjust your camera.
Photoshop.
No, we did the photo shoot yesterday, and I was like, I tried to do the blurry photo thing where you move, and I'm like,
or stand in front of it.
Yeah, the problem is the reflective nature of the refrigerator is so hot on me that it looked even worse. Anyway, it is what it is. I got over it, but anyway, you can
AI
relate.
Photoshop
Sort of,
magic.
Just be like, oh, this completely wood kitchen. Actually, I haven't thought about, should I spend the money on this and Photoshop this? But anyway, that was quite the ending. I always like to end things with a little bit of personal stuff. I really like what people are reading or how they like to learn. And I know, Rob, you're a big podcast guy, or I know you like to educate, but maybe each share something that either maybe your favorite book over the last year or something you're reading now, a way that inspires you to either be better as a person or be better in your profession.
Yeah, I suppose I am constantly looking at projects. My mind is always thinking in 3D. I go to sleep thinking in 3D. So I think just seeing visuals and really expanding my mind to what's possible and what's out there. I'm also an artist, so I like to draw. I like to paint. I actually am getting my little girl into drawing.
Oh,
so every day we doodle together.
How old is she?
She's almost 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, fun.
But I think those kinds of things, just always keeping my mind in this design realm, really helps me just think creatively and think outside the box. You can go ahead, Rob. I'll think of something I'm reading lately.
Sure. Yeah. Just the first book that occurs to me is the one on my nightstand right now. It's called Billionaires Row, and it's about the development of the super tall skyscrapers in New York City, which leads to a lot of conflicting feelings for that type of architecture, but very fascinating just hearing the stories. I love reading nonfiction stories about how buildings are built or bridges are built. And so that's one that comes to mind. And then beyond that, just trying to get out in nature is inspirational. And so we do that a lot, and trying to keep up with a 7-week-old little girl.
Yeah.
7 weeks.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing. What's
She's
her
a
name?
Hattie.
Hattie. Aw.
She's sweet.
Yeah, that's amazing. I appreciate both of your times. And for those that are looking to reach out to you, we'll have everything on the website. But I think it's just jmad.com or
JMAD.design.
Yep.
jmad.design. Okay. We will have that all in the show notes, so you don't have to worry. You can just click the little hyperlink and you'll go right there. Thanks again for coming on. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So you can review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.